from May 22nd to order at 8 p.m., starting a little bit late this evening to allow a few of our members to attend events at Coolidge and Parker this evening. We'll walk through the agenda, then jump right in. So we'll start with any public comment for anybody here that has any points of concern or information or positive shares for anything not on the agenda. It's 2 to 3 minutes, you name and address, and we go from there. We'll then move to the consent agenda and then reports with our student, superintendent, director of finance, and any liaison or subcommittee reports we have. We'll then move to new business, at which point we will discuss the Q3 financial update, and then move on to kind of the big point of this evening is the superintendent summative review process. When we get there, we'll talk a little bit about the timeline for that process, and then have Dr. Milczewski present some of the evidence this evening. From there, we move into a heavy policy evening, including our second reading of one of our policies, and then we'll move into multiple other policies. A first reading for, just update readings, and then another first reading. And we will complete the evening by adjourning to executive session, not to return, to discuss strategy with regards to preparation for negotiations with central office and principals. So we will see how that goes, okay? And here comes our sixth member. So we're good to go now. We were good to go anyway, because there are 5 of us, but we have all 6. 8:02. So let's start with any public comments. We have one member of the public here. Any comments? No comments. Okay. So we'll move on to the consent agenda, and we'll start with a motion first.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Any discussion, any concerns, any points of clarification? Seeing none? Okay. Just a quick, no need to roll call because we're all here in person. All in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. So we'll move on to reports. We'll start with our friend over here.
All right, perfect. So, not a lot on the list tonight, but we'll start with the Reading Boys track team, and they actually entered a quote, so I will apologies for reading off the paper, but this is what they wanted us to read. The Reading Boys track team had a fabulous meet on Saturday, winning the D3 state relays with 65 points. It was our second state relay victory since 2016, and it was a total team effort as we scored points in all but 2 events. The meet showcased our talent and depth. On the track, the distance team led the way with a first-place finish in the 4x800 and a second-place finish in the 4-mile. Senior Chris Barbado led the way in each race. In the sprints, we scored a third-place finish in the 4x400, a second-place finish in the SMR, and a fourth-place finish in the 4x100. Juniors Ryan Pulpy and Cam Gigler and senior Clay Chase were key runners on those teams. In the field events, we got second place in the shot put led by James Donahue, and key third-place finishes in both the LJ and TJ relays. We also scored the javelin, HJ, and hurdles, and key performers were senior Timothy McGrath, sophomore Michael Caraco, junior Luke Rogerson, junior Carmani Merville, and senior Derek Silva. Then up next, freshman fly-up day will take place on June 2nd during the school day. Student rocket ambassadors, myself included, will assist Ms. Buckley and class advisors, Ms. Keefe and Ms. Santa Maria, in welcoming the class of 2029 to RMHS. This week, 160 seniors participated in the Senior Internship Showcase in the Fieldhouse, during which they presented the key takeaways from their internship programs, to include the durable, work-based learning skills that they will carry with them in the future as a result of their internship experience. And then as of right now, senior events are in full swing and kicked off last night with Senior Awards Night, in which many seniors were recognized and or earned scholarships for all their performance during high school. Congratulations to all of them. Some upcoming events tonight, as we all know, is senior prom. I know all the seniors will be having fun with that. Going to be parties throughout the next week. Tomorrow evening is the second act play made possible by the Reading Coalition, which will be shown to grades 9 through 11, with a goal of raising awareness among students about the dangers of risk-taking behaviors at a young age. And I believe that'll be during Flex Block tomorrow, so I've heard. May 30th, graduation at 6 p.m. at either Turf 1 or the Fieldhouse if the weather permits. I hope it's good for all those that will be attending. Future Freshman Night 2 is scheduled to take place on June 2nd, starting at 6 p.m. on Main Street at RMHS. And this is just a chance to give incoming freshmen a way to check out RMH clubs, activities, athletics, the school building before the school year starts in September. And then Two more things. We have dance team and cheerleading team tryouts on June 4th, 6th, and 5th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Coolidge, and also for the dance team, 3:30 to 5. So those will just be for the fall seasons. And then lastly, the underclassmen awards ceremony will be on June 5th at 7 p.m. here at RMHS. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions? No?
A lot going on.
Yeah. Busy end of the school year, but looking forward to it being over. Definitely.
You have a few more weeks ahead of you.
Yeah. I won't get ahead of myself, but I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Phil, do you want to have any report, or just wait for the update?
Well, I think my report comes under new business, so
Okay.
other than that, I don't have anything.
Okay. Dr. Milczewski?
Great. I would just like to give one thank you to the high school leadership team, particularly Katie Buckley, Megan Manos, and Brian Skeffington. They recently hosted a work-based learning collaboration day, which they brought in over 28 local school districts to come visit, over 50 participants and community partners such as WBLA, Emblaze, and a few others to get an idea of what's happening with our senior internship program under the umbrella of transforming the high school experience. It was really exciting to see just from a couple of years ago, sort of none of the work being in place, whether that's Innovation Pathways, dual enrollment, or senior internship, and now that team really running with it and becoming a leader in the field. So the feedback from the 28 districts was very positive, and I would just like to give a thank you to those leaders for their work in in building out great programming, but also then in sharing that learning with local districts too. It was a great event for all, so thank you.
Great. Thank you. Leading. I like to see that. Okay, moving on to, or any questions for Dr. Milczewski? No? Okay, moving on to liaison on subcommittee. We'll start with Carla.
So I concur with you of all the senior activities going on this week and just seeing the staff out in front. I was privileged enough to be able to, at the senior awards night, give our school committee award to Tamia Jones. It was just such a nice event. Tamia racked up a few. It was a really nice event. It's a lot of work that the staff puts together, so that was really nice. Promenade was another thing tonight that, should have been outside. It's inside, and it just, everybody does a really good job. And obviously, they're all at the prom right now, so, and the prom Easter, as they're calling it now. Right. On a good note, Killam passed at our townwide vote on May 13th. The designer told us that they had never seen such a high percentage turnout for a positive vote. So that was kudos, and it just shows what the community values and what they think of and how they support our school systems and in what type of dire need Killam is in. So we are now kind of working on negotiating our designer contract, our OPM contract. We're hoping to have a meeting possibly on June 2nd to go over all of that stuff, a KSBC meeting. And we'll be diving into all of that. So it's exciting.
Tom, can I make a quick
Please
note? I just want to thank Carla, too, because I think that is, yes, the 80% is a sign of the community support of the school, but also I think a testament to the work that you led as on the Killam School Building Committee. Huge thanks to Sarah and to Sean for your leadership as well. I think few people see behind the scenes of how many hours that you poured into that project. It was a ton, whether those are community-facing hours, but also behind the scenes. So just thank you for your steady, strong, visionary leadership through that process. You went above and beyond in hundreds, if not thousands of hours in that project. So a huge thank you to you, and I want to make sure the community knows that you poured so much into that, so thank you.
I was at the field house for as the votes were coming in, and honestly, people were like, "Oh, are you so excited?" And I said, "Nope, I feel like I've been kicked in the stomach right now." Just thinking about, okay, what's our next step? So it's, we have such a good team across the board, and we're just really excited to see what's going to happen.
But you're always thinking about what's next.
Right?
All right, this is the next hurdle.
Can I just pile on? You gave credit to the community for the sort of overwhelming positive vote, which, certainly appreciate the community for showing up and voting. But I'll just pile in with what Tom said. You went out and talked to any organization that would have you about, what the need for the project and what we were going to do there. So you deserve a ton of credit for the awareness that was built for the project and broad support for it across age brackets, political leanings, all that sort of stuff. So really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kudos. All right, let's move on. Laura?
I have nothing to follow that.
All right, Aaron?
No report.
Sean?
So the audit committee, of which I forget I'm a part until once or twice a year when we have a meeting, will be meeting next week to review the RMLD annual audit. And that is my report.
Right before our meeting next week. So
Right before our
Sean
meeting
and I
next
will be
week.
busy.
Yep.
Yeah. Sarah?
No report.
And I have no report because Sean took the one thing there. But that's- he can provide the update next week too, on what happens. in the audit.
Yeah, I'm
Sure
sure
we'll
it'll
be told
be.
it's a phenomenal audit. Like we always
Yeah, I
do
could
about
probably
the
give that
audit.
report
You
now.
can probably give it right now,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so let's move forward. And, Dr. Milczewski, Phil, you want to start with the FY25 Q3 financial update?
Great, I'll pull it up.
Are you starting or am I?
All you.
It's all mine. All right, well, thank you. First, I want to say that I'm very glad that I did survive my first town meeting vote. So I thank everyone for all their assistance in helping getting me through that. In front of you, you've got the Q3 financial report. Looks just like we've used for the last 2 quarters. Just to remind folks, again, this is our estimate of where we think we're going to end the year by at the end of Q3. So the numbers will tend to change quarter over quarter, not by a whole lot. As I said to the superintendent earlier this week, overall financially, we are in good shape for fiscal year '25, and I think we'll be able to well position ourselves for fiscal year '26 as well, once we get through this. So a couple of things to keep in mind. We look at the general fund. The general fund is showing some assumptions. One is that we will expend all of the non-personnel lines. It also shows the encumbrances of all the remaining salary expenses. And the assistant business manager, Kate, has gone through and pretty much tied those out, so those look pretty solid for the rest of the year. It also includes expected expenditures of $350,000 for our year-end technology refresh, $300,000 for a transfer to the special ed stabilization fund, and about $1.2 million of special ed tuition prepays. So based on all that, we're anticipating that we would end the year on the general fund with a surplus of about $75,000, which is down from an estimate at the end of Q2, which was around $250,000. We had a couple of expenses come through that were unplanned. We had $50,000 for the investment in EduClimb, new software that we're utilizing to be able to pull all of our student data together into one application. We also were hit, well, I would say hit, our renewal for Redeker, which is the student information system. Apparently, when we first bought it, we actually had a 3-year contract on it, and that seemed to have gotten lost. And so we did not budget anything for this year for that. So that's part of an unplanned expense for this year. And then finally, we have some unplanned expenses for our IT issues that we've incurred this year. But we do expect that under the insurance policy that we have, that we should get reimbursed for a good chunk of those expenses as well. So putting that all into the mix, you'll see again, we're planning at this point to be about $75,000 left at the end of the year, being able to do all the things that I just mentioned, which is pretty much in line with what the district has done the last several years. Any questions on the general fund?
Since you bucketed it there, the $300,000 that we're earmarking, for lack of a better way to say it right now, towards the reserve, not stabilization fund. There's a difference, because stabilization requires town meeting vote, reserve does not, right? Reserve just requires select board and school committee approval. That would put us, where? It would put us at?
About
according to-
700,000.
About 600, yeah, almost 700,000,
Yep, with the earnings for the year included.
which is more than the 1% number that we've kept ourselves at. So let's just look at that against our policy and make sure it's the right number. We can go above a little bit, but let's just make sure we do that. And probably, I think we're going to schedule it for 2 weeks from now anyway, to
Correct.
have that discussion. But let's make sure we align that with the policy appropriately and don't overdo it.
Just for my own edification, so the Reading School Committee policy is 1%, even though the law is 2%.
Reading School Committee policy is 1%, even though the law is 2%, with some allowances for up and down, some
Okay.
flexibility, obviously, as it grows by itself and whatnot, with the intent of making sure we don't cripple the rest of the town budget as a result of it, right? So it was sort of a verbal agreement with town meeting as part of the launching of the reserve fund.
The language is to maintain a balance of approximately 1% of annual net school spending, and then 1.5 is sort of the ceiling where we commit to spending it down if we're going to be above 1.5.
Okay.
We won't be above 1.5
No.
based on this number, but let's just be cautious of it. 300,000 is still in range. We'll have that conversation when the time comes.
Next.
Our latest was 2% of net school spend would be a little over $1 million, so.
You know, 1.2 million as of the last report,
Yep.
so it's going to be a little higher
Yep.
this year, but
This would be like one.
Well, again, I'll be back in 2 weeks with the Q4 preliminary, so we'll have that all lined up as well.
okay.
All right, the next page is grants. Not too many changes. We did add a few grants in the third quarter. We have the BETCO BBI, which is the Boston Bridges Initiative, which is a outside donation, and that money has been used and is used for, I believe, the roller skating outings. Safe and Supported Schools, which I believe is a continuation of the program from last year. Financial Education Innovation or Initiative, 3,200, that's a state treasurer's grant, and that's going to be used to fund a program, I believe, in this upcoming November, in conjunction with the Reading Cooperative Bank Branch. And then finally, the IDEA IEP, that's additional funding to continue the training for staff and the use of the new IEP program that DESE has put out. There were a couple of mid-year adjustments. The state goes through and on, especially on the entitlement grants, around January, they go through to find out which districts haven't claimed their money, and if they haven't, then they reallocate out any funds that are left over. As a result, we got $439 more for Title II. And there was also an increase in the Department of Public Health grant award amount that went up by $7,900. Again, that's my understanding. They had money left, and so they reallocated it.
Tom or Phil, do you know remind us what the DPH money is used for within our district? Is it nursing? Is it something else?
It's the nurses' grant. You know, I'm not-
That's actually the grant that, let me see, 98,000, that's for Tiana's role as well,
Okay, so,
for the multilingual learner community liaison.
okay,
And thank you to Mary for applying to that grant.
great.
Other than that, just some adjustments in terms of the projected year-end balance. The biggest change would be in the IDEA 240 grant, which is a special ed grant. Right now, projected we'll have about 100,000 more left over than we thought we were going to have, and that's primarily due to, the turnover that we have with our, not IAs, the paraprofessionals, and how tough it's been just to fill the positions anyway throughout the course of the year. Any questions on the grants?
So it looks like you're good to go.
All right. Next, we have the revolving accounts. Again, the revolving accounts are pretty much tracking where they were in Q2. There was one change that was made, and that was on the extended day program. We initially had that coming in at around 2.2 million for revenue and a little over 2 million for expenses. Having met with the folks, we've scaled back both the expense and the revenue side down to 1.8 on both sides. They've reduced the amount of use of outside services for some of the programs. And at this point, it looks like the program is probably going to break even for the year. They are making some changes for next year that should get it back to where it will be generating a small surplus going forward. Other than that, there really isn't much going on, just, updates to how much we spent in terms of some of the revolving accounts, increasing both the revenue and the expense sides. Any questions on that?
Yeah, so anybody else before I jump in? So the extended day, you said there's been some changes, or there will be some changes. before your time, we had a bit of a challenge with that program, so have we stabilized, do we feel like we've stabilized now, and we can be confident in the carryover? Because it's a pretty light carryover versus the overall cost and expense of the program, 88,000 versus 1.8 million, so.
I am at this point, having sat down with both Chris and Mackenzie last week to go through detail as to where we are, what they were anticipating, and then we talked quite a bit about what's going to happen for next year in terms of their expenses, and they're going to rely even less on outside vendors for next year, so that will reduce a lot of the contracted services expenses. And they're doing some changes in terms of how they will be charging for special, I wouldn't say special programs, but additional programs.
Okay, so that's a yes, but they've also, at least I'm interpreting that as a yes.
Yes.
But they've used those outside programs in the past to manage capacity and bring in students. So as a result of removing those outside programs, are we reducing capacity?
I don't believe so, because there are very minor waiting lists at a couple of the schools. So one of the things I've asked them to do going forward is to send both to the superintendent and myself, as well as Dr. Hardy, if there are any students on wait list. There is one school that has a bubble, and I have forgotten which school it is, that has probably 20 students that are on the wait list. All the other ones are single digits. So overall, I think they've got it pretty close to being able to satisfy the demand that's out there. Not going to say it's perfect, but I don't think it's anywhere near what it was a couple of years ago in terms of students on wait lists.
Yeah, Tom, maybe just for a future meeting, maybe we can get an update from Sarah or somebody, or Dr. Hardy or somebody, but it was about creating more capacity, but it was also about sort of creating more enriched programming, right? You know, so if we're pulling back on some of that, you know, that may very well be viable and the right decision, but I'd be curious to hear more, personally, yeah.
We can also invite Chris Nelson to come to an
Yeah.
upcoming meeting too, just to give an idea, you know, given that those numbers are tighter, an idea of just, you know, how we're making sure we're in a good position financially, but also programmatically, what are we thinking for the future? We have had a lot of those conversations internally, so I think he'd be happy to have that conversation publicly.
Yeah, it might be good summer conversation as well.
Let's do it.
As we talk through things in either July or August.
Great.
Because he can explain it far better than I can at this point.
Okay. All right. Sean, great point. Thank you for adding that. Okay, thanks, Phil. Anything else?
The next one is the gift donation, and we're calling it stabilization, but I guess I should be calling it a reserve fund.
Yes.
So we'll make that change. Just a presentation change. We moved the reserve fund out of the revolving accounts onto this report, out of the revolving accounts. And again, in terms of the gift donation, there isn't very much in terms of overall changes. It's fairly steady with where it was for Q2.
I think we're missing a couple of donation funds in here. The most recent one for Officer Savio.
That is, do we open that in Q3, or we did not officially open that till Q4? I'll have to check the date, because I know it's open on the books. But I'll have to see when we officially opened it on the
I was
books.
here, and it wasn't in April, so I wasn't here, and it wasn't in May, so it had to have been in March, so it had to have been Q3.
I don't have an answer for you that.
So let's just, if we can just double check that one. And there's another one that was the handover from the foreign world language program that should be on here too.
Tanya's.
Yeah.
Yep.
Talia's. Danya's, yeah. Danya
Yep.
Mahoney's.
Yeah.
Well, it's not hers, but she was managing
She was
it
the
until
name.
she gave it
Yeah.
back to us, right? That one should be on here too.
Great.
Carly?
So the Libby Scholarship Donation Fund, there were quite a few scholarships, and a pretty significant amount in each,
22.
right? And I'm assuming this is the interest on this account.
That's the balance, that's the balance before we just donated, before we just approved those scholarship distributions.
Are the scholarships do they make up the interest? Or you happen to,
It's going to come down. Unless, I mean, we don't see interest here, but we should. So the interest is missing on that. They're 1.1 should have a lot more interest than 0. But it was about, so it's $4,000 scholarship, so 22 of them, 88,000 should come off. So we're not going to have 88,000 worth of interest in there, most likely. Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, I could be wrong.
right, matters what kind of fund it's
Goes to
in,
the general fund, 'cause those
matters
are
where it's at.
managed by the town, but I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I think that's managed by the town, so we'll have to work through with them appropriately to get the numbers there. And I think Sharon may not reconcile or, allocate the interest
Yeah.
until the end of the year or something along those lines, but there should be some.
It was impressive.
Yeah.
It's an impressive scholarship,
Yeah.
I think,
It
right?
is. And that, if you recall, I think we voted to distribute it, March or April, as well, so, yeah.
After that, less than scintillating performance, can I move on to the next page?
You're not doing, no, don't worry about it, Phil, you're doing fine, keep going.
All right, and then finally, the last one is the student activity counts. Obviously, you'll see a lot of activity going through the high school student activity count because of the high school, for the seniors' graduation, the junior prom, various trips, a lot of money in there for the cap and gown purchases, as well as all that stuff that's going on there. Beyond that, again, very few changes quarter over quarter.
So on this one, the other one, or I'm not sure if this, I think this does fall in this bucket, but each of the class ofs should be on this list too. Class of
The
25.
class ofs are a sub-account under each of these.
Under the student activities.
Yes. So if you want that on there, then you're going to have a report that's going to be about this long.
I think it's, I don't know, I'm curious what other people think, but especially, we had an issue before where we weren't closing the class O's after graduation, so it would probably be good to see that at least the current and maybe the next year is reported. Maybe this would be my thought. but
Maybe we look at them at year end. They don't, I mean, they don't
Yeah.
really need to be reviewed quarterly.
That's a fair point, as long as we don't forget them. It's-
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you go back and look, the last few years have been all closed out within the time frame. I think it's 3 months
Yeah.
or 2 months.
Great.
Yeah.
So I know that 24 is closed out, so obviously 25 is our next one to make sure that it gets taken off the books by the end of September.
Distributed to the president in some bank account somewhere.
I'm sorry.
It gets distributed to the class officers
Yes.
in a bank account of their management.
And then they can use it for reunions and such.
So any other questions on the student activity accounts?
Thank you again.
Again, I want to thank the front office staff, especially my staff. They do a whole lot of work and a great job, and they've been putting up with me for the last 9 months. I'm like the 2-year-old. Why?
You know what? I'll say this, there's never a problem asking why. And just because, or this is how we've always done it, is not a good enough answer, right? So keep asking why, and we'll keep finding things that need to be improved.
That's the end of my report.
Okay?
It's not a good enough answer when your kids ask that question either. It's really good advice, Tom.
If he asks it consecutively, then you can relate that to a two-year-old.
All right, any other questions for Phil? Nope. Okay, thank you, sir. And as you
With
said,
permission, I'm going to
you are,
vamoose.
have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You don't
Drive
have fun with
safely.
policies with us, so,
Stay dry.
you can stick around or you
I
can
think
go.
I might stick around, yeah.
All right.
Riveting, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, I like listening on the processes,
Yep.
It's interesting.
All right, Dr. Milichewski, let's see, we're gonna move to Dr. Milichewski's 2-year review. So I'm gonna start with this is, I had every intention of putting a memo together to outline the timeline, and then I had to travel to San Francisco suddenly, so I apologize that I did not do so. But here's where my head is, and I'm happy to get feedback from the rest of the team here as we go through this as well. We will be doing his review publicly on our meeting on June 5th. So everything I'm saying is working backwards from there. We will have his summative today. We will have a strategy update next Thursday. We will have the student services update next Thursday. The strategy update will include most of the data that would normally align with the teaching and learning update as well. So everything we would need, in addition to what we've already received from teaching and learning over the last 2 years, is part of the review cycle. And then we'll have a teaching and learning update on the 5th that is not data related, but just other things. So the intent here is that with what Dr. Milczewski presents tonight, including the goals and the factors, the focus indicators, as well as with the strategy update next Thursday and the student services update next Thursday, we have, and everything we've received over the last 2 years, we have enough data and information to complete the reviews. Now, as most of the committee, and Laura, you're first, this is the first time we're doing a 2-year review, right? And we, 2 years ago, because it was a 2-year review, agreed we were doing all of the focused indicators this time. So it's a lot to go through. You'll hear from Dr. Milczewski shortly that he's tried to arrange the evidence in alignment with that to make it easier for us to do. But that is something that we need to consider as we go through it. Many of us also already did, or 5 of us, but Laura can read through the packets from the past before, did the formative last year as part of our process. So by all means, fall back on what you did last year. Look at that as well as input, because if you remember, 3 of the 4 goals mostly were met last year, and the 4th is what's more or less pending. So we can talk through that as well. So timeline-wise, what I'm thinking about is this. I would like you to get as much of your draft done over the next 3 to 5 days. And have time with Tom, with Dr. Milczewski, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week to review that. Right, so you have a chance to go back and forth with him and ask him, he can ask questions, or you can provide clarifying or anything else like that. And then finalize it, I'm gonna say by noon the following Sunday. Because what I'm gonna do is after you finalize it by noon on the following Sunday, I will only receive your final versions. Your final versions will also go to Olivia, right? So you'll email Olivia, myself, and Tom, your final versions on or before noon on the Sunday, May 31st or something like that, if I recall correctly, May 30th, something like that.
Sunday's the 1st.
The 1st, June 1st, thank you. And then I will that afternoon, evening, review it, find themes, pull it together to create the summative, so that I have that ready for the packet, which goes out for the public and your review for that Monday/Tuesday when Olivia is able to distribute it with the updated agenda for the 5th. So, again, backing up, next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, have your draft ready to review with Tom. Finalize it after Thursday night's meeting when you have the final related pieces of information that might feed into it, all the way through the weekend until Sunday at noon, and get me your draft, or give me your final version. I don't want your draft, don't send me your draft, please don't, because I don't want it to inform anything I'm doing, and I don't plan to read it anyway. Give me your final version by noon on the following Sunday. Does that make sense? Any feedback, questions, timeline concerns?
Do you mind just dropping that to us in a note after this? Thank you. Okay.
I will absolutely do that as well, yes.
And yours is optional, Laura.
Okay.
I don't know if that was explained to you.
It was not, but
It has
I
not.
will.
So some people, so typically it's a 1-year cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So some people, upon being elected in April, have chosen to go ahead and participate in it. My first year, I think I did notes, but I didn't feel like I could rate, so everyone has handled that a little differently. But given this is a 2-year cycle, don't feel that you have to do quite what we're all doing, but you can also,
Do as much as you want to.
it's a lot to learn.
essentially.
It's a great learning process for you to sort of just like go through it and reflect upon
Okay.
Right.
the schools.
I will set some time with you, probably this weekend
Yeah.
or something, to walk you through the superintendent review process and documentation, so you can see it, and then you can make a decision about how you want to proceed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
That way you're brought up to speed on at least the documentation and the process and everything else. Everybody else here has done it a few times, so they're used to it. First time is always the most interesting, especially as you try to correlate. You're like, what are they trying to say there? So we'll go through that and figure it out together and answer questions.
Great, thank you.
I did ask Chuck if he wanted to provide feedback as well, and he said, I have no intention. He said, you know what I think of Dr. Milichewski? He's the best ever. So,
It's like, put that in bold print.
so you might see that in the summative. We'll see, but that was the essence of Chuck's review. So, not surprising to anybody. So it's not any sort of public information that I just disclosed, but or non-public information, I should say. So with that said, that's the timeline plans, so we can get this all done in the timeline we are. And I also want to thank the committee for lack of a better say, humoring us as we are working through the schedule for this last couple of weeks. Aaron and Tom and I are like going back and forth, and yes, some of it is because I will be on vacation for my 25th anniversary. Some of it's because Tom's going to be on vacation at the end of June, so we ran into this confluence of 3 weeks of no meetings where we could have both the chair and the superintendent there. So we'll finish up on the 5th and then commence again back in July, basically. Okay?
I was going to say something, but it was unrelated to this topic, so we'll hold it
You
for the
did that
end.
like,
I will hold it for the end.
Hold it for the end. All right, so Dr. Milichewski, I think it's on to you, and you have a presentation for us,
I do.
which we also should put in the packet as an update after the fact.
Perfect.
I was going to say, will this get emailed to us?
It will. So a little bit about what's ahead. So following the meeting tonight, I'll share both the presentation and also a link to just a more detailed folder with evidence that will go a lot more detailed than what I'll share tonight. Tonight, my intent is just to share some very high-level overview of my progress towards both standards, the 4 standards for administrative leadership, and also the 4 goals. It was 5 last year. We know that I graduated from NISIP, so that's, you'll see it's 4/5 on there. I'd like to share 2 things just as I jump into the presentation tonight. First, I really appreciate that many of the goals written in here are also goals that are shared, whether that's explicitly or not, with the committee, with principals, with teachers, with community members of things that people have wanted to see get done anyway. So I love that many of my own individual goals are also goals that are shared by many. And then the obvious piece is a lot of the progress that I share tonight are things that are shared progress and, involve much collaboration and teamwork and the work of others behind the scenes. Hopefully the school committee sees themselves reflected in some of the work that we'll talk about tonight. Certainly our central office leadership team, our principals, our teachers, families. But I think that one of the things about this review is, yes, it is about me, but it's also, I don't think there's anything in here I did singularly. So just a huge thank you to everyone for some of the things that are encouraging in here that we'll share out that reflect the hard work of so many. So as the committee knows and the community may know, first, there's kind of 2 parts to the evaluation. One is progress towards 4 or 5 goals that we've outlined, and then there's a rubric where I am rated against standards in the rubric. I'm going to start by sharing an overview of the superintendent goals. You see that the 5th goal was in place at the start of last year, which was the first 3 years I was involved in the new superintendent induction program. That goal has sort of fallen off, given that I've now moved on from that program. So I'm going to go through, again, at a high level and speak to each of these goals, and then there's more detailed information coming from the committee. First goal was around improving evidence of student learning, engagement, and achievement. 3 parts of this goal. 1, meeting 80% of DESE's MCAS achievement and growth targets, both at the school and district level. 2, increasing the planned participation in advanced coursework at RMHS by 10% and for subgroups. And then by 24-25 also, and then data for next year, increase enrollment and innovation pathways to 150 students, and then a target there for continued engagement. Talks about some key actions and some benchmarks. I'm going to get into sort of an analysis of where I think I am towards this goal. First, I believe that as a district, we met this goal. And this is a goal that's also shared in our district strategic plan. There are 10 district targets that are outlined, that DESE has outlined for us. You'll see that 6 relate to achievement and 4 relate to growth. There's achievement in ELA, achievement in math, achievement in science, and then there's also high school and non-high school is how DESE breaks it up. Also, and you see these spots where it talks about growth in ELA and in math, typical growth high means between an SGP of 50 to 60. So you'll see that we met our growth goals and being above 50 in SGP. We met the target in 2 areas, exceeded the target in 2, and then declined in 2, which meant that we met 80% of our targets at the district level. Going a step further, at the school level, we also met 80% of our targets. We made 32 of the 40 targets when you compile them all horizontally across the top. You'll see ELA achievement, then math achievement, then science achievement, and then ELA growth, and then math growth in all the schools vertically on the left. And you can see in the chart there whether or not we either met the goal, met the target, exceeded the target, or declined or did not meet the target. And again, out of the 40 potential spots there, we hit in 32 of them. So as you'll look through this more later on, but total, that puts us right at 80% of targets. Feel very enthusiastic about what we're seeing around advanced coursework participation for a few reasons. You see the trend has shifted up in 2023 from 694 to this year 700 to, whoa, what happened? Next year registrations 1,067. A couple of things happened. There's a couple things in a caveat. The caveat is these are still course requests, so they will not be able to necessarily fulfill all of these. But I've put in italics a few things that are important for the community to know. This number spiked because we are now opening up more APs at the younger level, younger grades. 2, we've opened up some really high interest AP courses, AP Psych, AP Econ, and then AP Pre-Calc, and also now our new dual enrollment courses where we now offer 9 courses. That sort of opened the top off for us with this number. For those who love the Boston.com school rankings, this is one of the numbers that is key, but it's a lagging indicator, so it'll take it a couple years to catch up, but that should give us a big boost there, and we're trying to get as close to that 1,067 students in there. We don't have that broken down by demographic subgroup data yet. We feel pretty confident given that significant jump that we'll be where we need to be. Innovation Career Pathways, we now have 195 students enrolled in ICP for 25-26 school year, including 51 incoming freshmen. And then we wanted an 80% retention in the program, and we are right at about 86% retention in the pathway programs. Those are just high-level overview of some of the data that represents what we think is meeting our targets, but I'm happy to pause there if there's any questions. Sean.
Not for the evaluation, but just out of curiosity, when the 1,067 gets scheduled, could we get an update on where the number lands in
Absolutely.
those breakdowns?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be
Yep.
great.
When I talked to the high school team, they feel confident that it will still be, they said at least a 250 to 300 increase from the previous number. Yeah, good point.
The breakdowns are interesting as well, though, obviously.
Which classes?
Yeah.
Of course, which classes?
Classes and grades, right?
Exactly.
Courses, grades, the demographics, all of it, right?
Yeah, like I'd love to know how many sophomores are enrolled in AP next year, that sort of thing.
And which AP courses are really popular. AP Psych is a really popular one already, so we can get more detailed data.
Great.
Do we have data on the other end in terms of the outcomes of the AP exams?
We do, and that's all public too. So if you go to DESE's website, you can see by which AP class, and you can see how many students took it and sort of how many students passed. It's really interesting dive in there.
We typically get an update on that in our guidance update, which we do in the early spring usually, on the most recent.
It's moved on us a few times.
Yeah.
It used to be December, it's moved out a little bit, but I think we had it in March this year.
Yeah.
I will tell you, those are numbers that our high school team is now monitoring very, very closely.
Yep.
I would, on this goal, I would like to, while I think we met it, I would like to continue on with this goal in the years to come. I think our next iteration on this goal is, we know that our third grade students were around the 95th percentile in ELA, 98th in math. I would like to see those trends continue sort of across the grade to boost our level of achievement. Secondly, subgroup data is really important to me. I think that we saw during the MCAS presentation, we still have some pretty persistent gaps in achievement for a variety of our demographic subgroups, and that's a spot that I think needs more attention, and I think more clarity in my goal and district goals as well moving forward. Second goal was around secondary math pathways. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I think we've talked about math pathways a lot. I feel really good about the work that we've done in terms of expanding math pathways. I think the next frontier for us in this goal area is one, now monitoring, setting some clear goals in terms of percent of students that we want taking advanced coursework when, and then outcomes within those classes and seeing how students are doing. So I think we've laid the groundwork for us now to be able to focus on outcomes in the future as well. Plus, mapping out clear pathways for students who are on a more advanced course track than what we traditionally have outlined right now, I think is something that we have to outline as well. So I think that's the next iteration of this goal for our team.
Just real quick on the next iteration on this as well, I think we should be looking at the line that we used to have. Those kids that that we've added that might have historically been below that line, how are they doing? But also, are the number of kids over time that meet that line increasing because of our investment in some of the math curriculum over the last few years as well?
Great point. I agree. So you can tell pretty quickly, I'm going to start just to make the next batch with, and I think that's good feedback on that. Goal 3 around data. I think this was the goal that was, I thought, the most challenging for us. I think the one piece of the community to know, a key component of this data was to develop a central location for storing key student level data that enabled flow in from various sources and organize the data for easy access and analysis by district and school leaders. That had not been in place, and you can see then that feeds into us being able to use data effectively, efficiently, using multiple sources of data. There's a piece around the early literacy screener and what that would mean. But number 7 was the big challenge for us too, is to begin a process developing a system to capture research and promising practice with the goal of institutionalizing district, school, and classroom level action plans, interventions, and supports. While I think we met goal 1 and 2, I don't think we're there yet in goal 3, whether we call that some progress, significant progress, we'll get into here. I think one thing we feel like we have made significant progress is the work that we've done with our early literacy screener. We feel like now we have a strong process around our early literacy screener and intervention system. We think that we have a very systematic process around what our supports look like, what our monitoring looks like, what family communication looks like, and we're starting to see some encouraging results in our DIBELS data, which you'll see in the information I share with you and also in the presentation at the end of the year. I would share the big gap for us has been having that data, that one place where we're able to store all of our various data forms, and we're excited to share that we just partnered with EduClimber, which is a platform or a warehouse that allows us to have all of our student achievement data, all of our behavioral data, all of our attendance data, demographic data, all in one space, one click of a button. I can click, hey, how's Alex doing? And all of his, on every metric around academic achievement, attendance, behavior, also look at certain classes, certain demographic groups, and look at those over time. I think that will allow for an ease of analysis and also a timely access in a way that we haven't been able to do that. So while I feel encouraged by what Sarah will speak more about is an Aaron about our early literacy progress, I think we're still moving towards this goal. I think the next iteration of this goal is going to have to include those that parts of building this, having this data warehouse, yes, that we use consistently, that facilitates effective data cycles at all levels of our organization, and then feeds into, I'll go back to this last piece, a process that really allows us to capture what's working and to be able to make sure that that becomes ingrained in who we are and what we do, despite any change across, leaders, schools, things like that. So I think there's some work, encouraged, but some work to be done, and excited to get EduClimber in place. In the resources that I share, you'll find that there's some more information about EduClimber, and I'm also going to set up a time for a demo and hopefully a sandbox platform for you to be able to play around in a little bit as well. Goal 4, we've spoken about at length, coaching, developing, and supporting principals. I'll share one thing, as I've shared many a time in the recent Wallace Foundation, not so recent anymore, it's 2023 study. It says it's hard to envision an investment that have a larger what's the language that they use?
ROI.
What's that?
Like an ROI.
ROI than investing in school leadership. I think what we're seeing, so therefore, we're starting to see some promising growth and achievement in our community. I think it's hard to disconnect that from what we're doing and investing in principals. So I think that we've continued really what we've been doing the last couple of years. You'll see some more evidence in what I upload. But I'd also like to flag that the next iteration from this goal is leveraging what we have with EduClimber, right? Our principals, on a click of a button, our leaders are now going to have access to data that they haven't yet had before, in a way that should prepare them to be more effective instructional leaders in their building. So I think while we've sort of done what we could with the resources we have, I think there's a lot of work ahead that should combine goals 3 and 4 in the future. And a huge work to our principals. I think the results that we're getting, I think our principals speak to a lot of the work that our leaders are doing. So shifting from goals into standards, if for those of you who are maybe watching or interested, if you just Google Massachusetts Administrator Rubric, it is a rubric that spans for all district level, systems level leaders, broken down into 4 standards with several sub-indicators below. First standards around instructional leadership. I'm going to quickly hit on just what I think are some of the big takeaways or some of the big outcomes or points of progress from my work, from our district's work in instructional leadership. 1, we spoke about meeting 80% of DESE's district-determined school achievement targets. 2, over the last couple of years, 8 of our 9 schools have achieved school records since early 2000s or the next generation MCAS era in school accountability percentile records. Parker last year becoming a school of recognition, also outperforming Coolidge in a couple of grade levels, which we know sitting in this seats last year was a major point of focus for our community. 2, achieving recent district records in grades 3 through 8, ELA and math achievement. We just spoke about 95th percentile in achievement for ELA grades 3 through 5 and grades 3 and 98th percentile in math for grades 3. Which we think is starting to set the stage for future achievement to be at a similar level. Recent work in our LEAD program, thank you everyone, recognized by MGH as a program in the 95th percentile. Talked a little bit about our work in innovation career pathways, increasing enrollment to 195, but also securing funding of over 500,000, DESE approval for 5 pathways, and being selected as the site for the announcement at the state level of the innovation career pathway grants. Moving to 9 dual enrollment classes, very excited to do that with UMass Lowell. And then if you also look at DESE's website, 2 targets that we hit this past year. 1 was for chronic absenteeism. We were 4th amongst traditional public school districts in the state in average daily attendance as well. And we also exceeded DESE targets for attaining English proficiency for our multilingual learners in 2024. In the end of year teaching and learning update, you'll see some encouraging progress for our MLLs this past year too. Much more in what I share with you, but I think these are just some of the high-level trends for us to say with confidence that we believe student achievement is moving in the right direction in our district. Any questions? Standard 1. Standard 2, management and ops. This could span a variety of different things. The first one, just like to thank the committee for your involvement in what has been 35 FTEs in the last 3 years. While 8 of those are the last 2 years, I did want to put that caveat in, just knowing that the committee's played a key role over the last several years in adding new positions that were critical in leading to what we see as these improvements in academic achievement, improvements in special education and SEL needs. I also appreciate all of the work of the committee to think creatively with school choice, with new revenue streams to allow us to navigate that in what is a challenging budgetary time. Thank you again to the committee for all of our collaborative work in moving to universal tuition-free kindergarten after being one of 24 districts in the state to charge. And kudos to our food service team. When we look at our pre-pandemic levels, 111,000 meal improvement in meals served per year. That's a 41% increase. Hosted the state's More Than a Meal Tour and was also then recognized as USDA's Turn Up the Beat Award for Excellence in Summer Meals. So food, yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Huge kudos to our food service department. Appreciate all that the community has done to support our updates in our METCO program, adding several new positions in the last couple of years, a new METCO coordinator, also a new METCO SAC this year, and then also what Millie has described, METCO CEO, as us quickly becoming a leader and model for METCO districts and expanding opportunities for students. Around ops, a ton of facility stuff. Thank you to Joe Huggins and the team. One point of pride here is around the work around our field house renovation, which is now about to break ground after graduation, which we think is going to be a huge win for our community and for our district. Thank you again, collaboration around all of the work with 5 union contract negotiations. It feels like forever ago, but that was within this evaluation cycle, all before contracts expired and making us much more competitive in the region. And then something, again, that felt like a while ago is our shift to a new high school schedule, and that work that has been a process over the last several years, starting with building a relationship with district management group to look at research and best practice around schedules, then going through many iterations of communication and feedback, leading to what we now think is a much better schedule for students. There is a ton that could fit in the bucket of management and operations, but just wanted to share a few that I think would be interesting to the community. In Standard 3 is all about family and community engagement. If you look closely at the indicators within Standard 3, they sort of break off into two categories. One of them being, what do you do when there's problems and challenges, like responding to concerns and to issues? And then the other bucket is around proactive work as engaging the community. I'd like to say it may be harder to quantify or even qualify how you go about navigating conflict or how you go about managing issues when they come to you. I think the committee knows my stance is always building relationships, listening, collaborating, doing that work up front is the best strategy to be able to avoid what can be the most challenging and catastrophic issues for communities. With that said, a couple of things that have been particularly important for our community over the last couple of years. One, the Killam School Building Project leading to 80%, as Carla shared. Two, I'd like to hit on a couple of community partnerships that have led to tangible changes in our community. One, the Coalition funding a .4 FTE middle school health position, the Coalition adding additional counseling positions, including a public safety clinician that impacts our schools, the town investing $100K in the community priority for universal kindergarten, partners at the Burbank YMCA, Burbank Arena YMCA Reading Rec, for helping to commit $40K a year for unified adaptive programming, our state legislators in the last couple of years, over $100K in earmark funding. I think the list goes on and on of how our community partners, those relationships are really leading to improvements in or investments in our district. We recently talked about the launch of our Children's Cabinet, again, bringing folks together in service of our students. The new multilingual learner family liaison role, trying to engage families who have historically not felt as connected or felt a sense of belonging in our community. That is changing through the work of Tayana and Karen, so huge thank you to them. But getting that role in the budget through a grant was really, really important. I think two other things important. One is the committee knows our team prides ourselves on meeting with anyone, anytime to try our best. Can't always find resolution, but to work through concerns and issues as they arise. Recently, in the last couple of weeks, met with the Birch Meadow PTO around our strategy for trying to improve and increase inclusive practices at the school. And just yesterday, met with parents of the LGBTQ plus community to talk about ways to better support their students and families in our district. And then something I think has been a plus for us is the data we've received through a new survey that we release every time a family leaves the district. We now give them a survey to say, hey, what could we have done better? What's your reason for leaving? We feel like that data is invaluable data for us to continue to think about sometimes some small shifts that we could make that could keep our families feeling satisfied and feeling supported in our district as well. And Standard 4 around professional culture. This standard is around what do you do to exemplify having a high bar, and what's the way that you continue to build a community and a culture of excellence. Personally, a lot of things for me on the last couple of years. One is continue to serve on SEAM and the collaborative board. I have taken on an expanded role, as this community knows, within the METCO program. One being on the METCO, being the superintendent rep on the METCO CEO hiring committee. I've been the superintendent speaker at the recent advocacy day at the state level. I was a superintendent speaker at the regional advocacy day last year, and then was the superintendent speaker along with our METCO team at Gillette Stadium this past fall around effective partnerships between METCO directors and superintendents. I've also started to expand outside the district a little bit. I was was one of the Massachusetts representatives at a national superintendent summit around building effective student supports, and then also mentor as the community is starting to learn many residents and fellows through the Harvard Graduate School of Education. That partnership's been really important to be able to have now two full-time fellows at no cost to the district and systems level leaders who have really made an impact in Barbara and Ramsey, who we know will make a big impact this next year. And then I think the other pieces around professional culture are ones that the community sees. Plenty of opportunities to present publicly around town meeting, plenty of times to speak out in the community on a variety of different issues, challenges, and then you'll see here a few other things that are just important for us to continue to message what's happening in our district, whether that's our community report, our program evaluations, or sort of updates annually on our district strategic plan. Much more information, many more resources, piece of evidence will be included, what's shared with the school committee, but I wanted to share what we think are some of the outcomes that have been particularly important, especially those that have been shared by many, the work's been shared by many. So I'll pause there or end there if there's any questions from the committee.
Anybody?
Tom, can you show just the slide just prior to this one more time?
Sure.
We see it, but just one thing to call out, I think, or at least I would say I see it. One thing to call out as you're pulling evidence together is the first indicator in this one is commitment to high standards, and it's about sort of like, what do you do to build high standards throughout the district? It'd be helpful to sort of highlight some of that evidence. I know there's a lot of it. I just want to make sure it's on your radar because it wasn't captured in these bullets.
Great. And Sean makes a good point too. If there's things in here, if indicators you feel like I haven't given enough evidence or you want more, please let me know. I think that's a good one. So thank you, Sean. And if I can share on that one too, part of that one I feel, while I can give our advice too, I think part of that, the important thing is also the things that may be harder to capture too. One part of that, walking the walk, building relationships, outcomes. But I do think there's some things I can put up there that are important, but I also think some of those, I hope the committee can infer or can, put into maybe that evidence may not be as clear on some of those as well. Some of those standards are tricky.
Okay, any other questions from anybody, or points? Got a lot to say, but I'll say it in 2 weeks, so. Thanks, thank you, sir.
No problem. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we will now move on.
Just texting Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle can join if she's ready. So we'll move on to old business, and we'll start with policy GBGE, or domestic leave policy. And I will start to share the screen here shortly. Just go for the full screen. And I know I'm going to have to zoom in, so give me a second to get to it. All right, here we go. And we should probably just pull that forward.
Should have brought an umbrella.
Do you want me to share from here?
You didn't?
Coat, my umbrella's in my truck. No, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you, sir.
I've got it.
It's the little things in life that make you happy.
I feel like I just got 20 years younger.
Yeah, so,
Like I'm the only one up here wearing glasses.
all right, so Michelle will join when she can. This policy we reviewed in our meeting back on March 27th as our first reading. There was one takeaway from that policy discussion, which was the discussion about whether it is 30 business days or 30 calendar days. And caught up with Michelle, and it is 30 calendar days. So we can update this to be, from a clarity perspective, calendar days within 30 calendar days.
Okay.
Right? Was the intent and what that number is. Otherwise, there were no follow-ups and there were no further points of conversation. I don't want to go through all the Grammarly stuff with everybody else here, and you guys don't want me either to, but I can without making any changes at a later point in time. Any substantive changes? Any other feedback, questions, concerns, or comments? No? Okay, so Aaron, do you have a motion, or do you want me to make it?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I move to approve amended policy GBGE, domestic violence leave, for adoption.
Second.
Seconded by Aaron. Any further discussion? All right, so no, let me place the spotlight so we can see Michelle. All in favor? All opposed? And it passes. So GBGE is finalized with calendar days. Thank you, Michelle, for the update.
You're welcome.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the first reading of GBEBD, online fundraising and solicitations. Don't laugh.
We're just getting started.
No, just wait.
She doesn't have all the history.
So the good news is, these aren't acronyms you need to remember. This is just an indexing. This is just indexing in the policy manual. It doesn't stand for anything.
So
Yeah.
there is a National School Road Policy indexing, and the Massachusetts Association of School Committees follows the same policy indexing. That's what the letters mean. But there's a history here where there was a meeting probably 4 years ago during COVID where we had to approve a bunch of them, and I had to say all of them in order.
I could not
and
stop laughing.
Nobody could stop laughing. So that's why when you started laughing, you started the whole thing up again. All right. This one, online fundraising and solicitation crowdfunding, is a brand-new one. It was originally a mass-created one. We have made many edits to the mass-created one, as you can see. This actually has gone through 3 meetings of the policy subcommittee, one back in 2023 and 2 this year, until we finally approved the version that's in front of you. And I'll pause there. Aaron, am I missing anything that you remember?
No.
Michelle, is there anything that you want to add on this one in particular?
So on this one, what we tried to do is we tried to reinforce school committee's oversight of fundraising activities in accordance with MDL. We prohibited the use of direct solicitations, ensure that all monetary donations comply with MDL Chapter 44, Section 53A, specifically around governing public fund management. And then we established clear protocols for handling excess and fulfilled donations to prevent misuse. So we also clarify that crowdfunding records are subject to public record laws for transparency and accountability.
Okay. Any feedback, questions, or concerns? This is a first reading, so we're just approving a first reading today, not the actual adoption. Sean?
I have a couple questions or observations. Some of the clauses in here are written as if a particular fundraising event is like a time-limited, as if everything's a time-limited fundraising event. I'm thinking about like Amazon wish lists in particular. You know, I know probably most of the school libraries, the librarians have Amazon wish lists that they keep updated on a regular basis, and books come off and books get added back on. So I just would want to be thoughtful about some of the requirements to, you know, notify the superintendent and things like that may be difficult operationally when you're talking about something that doesn't have a particular sort of start and end to it. And then my second question would be, do we believe, and is it our intent that, you know, the policy itself doesn't apply to PTOs who may do fundraising for, you know, Teacher Appreciation Week or things like that. But staff members often distribute material on behalf of PTOs. Would that qualify as a solicitation for the purposes of this policy? And if so, I don't think it matters that it's not the staff member who's, you know, sort of receiving the asked for, you know, donations or what have you. So I just wanted to call that out too, that feels like another use case we see today that I'm not personally bothered by. In fact, I think it's kind of critical, that may technically run afoul of this policy.
So I think the PTO side doesn't, because the first part of the approval is activities by school district employees. Your caveat there of them forwarding something the PTO is doing, might want to look at the language just to be sure, to your point. Would love to hear from Michelle and Dr. Milczewski as well. I don't think it was the intent to do that. I think it is the specific intent, and you've seen a lot of the cases here where we want to make sure we avoid any sort of perception that a teacher is putting out a request for something, and if a family does not participate, there is some consequence to a degree, right? So if a PTO is doing something, the employee is not even aware, usually, of who is donating or not donating, or shouldn't be, right? And it's employee use of crowdfunding for their classroom or their needs, as opposed to a PTO. So we can put an explicit statement somewhere in here if we find the right place, but I don't think this is intended to apply to any of that at all. Michelle, do you have any feedback or thoughts?
I think the major part for me is when we talk about the direct solicitations, it's really about that monetary direct solicitation. And so when we think about the Amazon wish list, in a lot of those cases, teachers may be asking for safe issues, but they're not saying, these parents of my classroom, please send me X amount of dollars so that I can buy something, right? So really focusing on what the items are versus the monetary solicitation for it.
Yeah, if you look through some of it as well, it's like employees may only use crowdfunding. It's not the employee using a crowdfunding thing if the PTO has created it and the employee is distributing it from an information share perspective. So we can look, Sean, I'm open to feedback as we go into the next reading. If you have anything that you think might help clarify.
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
talk
I'll think about
language
it.
Potentially to come back to clarify it further. Aaron, do you have anything?
I was just gonna, I don't have a elementary school student anymore, but best I recall, all the PTO stuff was under the weekly newsletter from the school, from the principal, had like the PTO section. So I don't think I was getting any PTO stuff just through a teacher. But you think
No, but
sometimes-
that's a staff member doing a solicitation, right? And so that's a good example. Like, my question would be,
Right, is the principal is a staff
that
member.
the principal is a staff member who's then posting a solicitation, that the
Okay.
solicitation itself may not be within, and I get it, that it's a different organization that's not subject to the policy that's doing the fundraising and collecting, cash in that case, but the solicitation is still by a staff member. And so, I just want to be thoughtful that we're not, inadvertently banning something that is common practice and not
And
the
it's
intent
helpful
of the
schools.
policy.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? I'm just going to put a note in real quick so I don't forget it.
As a next step, do you want us to, talk to legal about that? Did you want to talk to legal? Do we want to try to come up with some different language? How do we want to handle that?
When are we going to do the second reading? Are you
Probably
planning it
not
for
going to
next?
have time next week, so it might be the 5th or it might fall to July. I'll have to figure out the timing.
I mean, I would say if we're engaging with legal and any other policy stuff, then maybe throw this one on the list. It probably doesn't merit a conversation that we have to pay a few $100s an hour for in and of itself. And I can just think about it a little bit more and see if I have any suggested language next time around.
Okay, I'll just put a note for myself on that so we can follow up with it. All right, anything else then? John, thanks for the thoughtful feedback.
Sure.
All right, so move to approve the first reading of policy GBEBD, online fundraising and solicitations crowdfunding.
Second?
Seconded by, is that Carla?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? And the first reading passes. Thank you. I'll save a copy. For second reading. Post the comment. All right, so that moves us to GBJ, personnel records. And this is a single reading, single approval item. So GBJ personnel records mostly was updated in alignment with MASC. There were some additional changes by Michelle as well, but ultimately it is in alignment with MGL and other such things primarily, which you can see the updates in the legal refs, Chapter 4, Section 7, Chapter 66, and Chapter 93H about data breaches and whatnot. So, Michelle, anything you want to add?
So in this one, I adjusted to align with public record law. I clarified that most personnel records are confidential. There is certain information that is subject to public disclosure for Massachusetts law, such as job title, names, salaries. I added reference to public records retention schedules to ensure proper compliance and disposal. And then I specified legal references in regards to Chapter 66 versus FERPA, HIPAA, to clarify when and how employee information can be released to governmental agencies while protecting the home address. And then just replaced all the gendered pronouns with gender neutral terms.
Okay, any discussion or thoughts on GBJ personnel records? No? Then I will move to approve for adoption the amended policy GBJ personnel records.
Second.
Seconded by Aaron. Any further discussions? No? All in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. Thank you very much. I will move this one to our final set as well. We'll move to GCA, professional staff positions. That's the current one, and I gotta stop that from beeping him. Of course, it's my wife and son. GCA, professional staff positions. Okay, so this one again is updated to align with MASC, with a few additional updates from Michelle to clarify language and whatnot. But Michelle, please add any other feedback you had on this one in particular.
So in this one, I reworded the policy to specify the school committee establishes positions upon recommendation from the superintendent, that the school committee can only the school committee can formally eliminate a position that is established. And then I revised the language to indicate that the superintendent develops and presents job descriptions for review and approval to the school committee rather than formal approval for each modification. And this aligns with MESC. And I'm ensuring the policy acknowledges position changes must comply with collective bargaining agreements, and adding that the superintendent will maintain a comprehensive set of job descriptions and of course, ensure compliance with applicable state and federal laws.
Okay, any other feedback or questions? Or any feedback and questions, since there hasn't been any yet?
We've not been practicing this policy.
We have not.
We've been doing this very, I won't say casually. I mean, I think we have the conversation anytime there's a new role. You know, you're probably having the conversation with each of us, but we've not been doing this in a formal way, so it's good to revisit this one. As we think about the procedure on this, maybe we can think about it as a consent agenda item.
That's a good idea.
Yep, I like
In terms
that.
of new roles and adjustments.
Yep.
And it's appropriate as well as a result of our last meeting. There's some adjustments potentially happening to some of our job
Yep.
postings as well that would probably be good for us to review as part of consent agenda type stuff. I like that idea, Sean.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. That's part of the reason why going through policies every so often is good to say, well, what are we doing? Are we actually doing this or not? So, good, okay. Any further discussion or points of clarification? Okay. Then I move to adopt the amended policy GCA, professional staff positions.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. Thank you. Save copy. Approved. Save. Okay, and that moves us on to GCBA, professional staff salary schedules. GCE. Okay, so again, this one was updated in alignment with MASC, and then further clarified and updated by Michelle, adding in additional MGL references as well, and whatnot. So Michelle, anything else you want to add to this?
So I added language to emphasize that teacher salary schedule is to incentivize retention, ongoing professional development, and leadership opportunities. We specified that principal and administrator salaries will be based on documented evidence such as performance evaluations, achievement of district goals, and regional market rates. We included the responsibility of the superintendent to present evidence supporting salary increase recommendations, enhancing transparency, and clarifying that salary decisions for both teachers and administrators will be made in compliance with state and federal law, including the Massachusetts Wage Act.
Okay. Any questions on this one? Any clarifications or notes?
It's probably implied, so I can take it or leave it maybe, but in that sentence where, in the paragraph that ends with "and regional market rates,"
Yep, this one?
yeah, could we, what do folks think about adding something like "and regional market rates for comparable positions"?
It's fair for me. Michelle, do you have any feedback on that?
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Anything else? Any objections to that amendment?
No. No.
Okay. Any other feedback or notes? Okay. So then I will move.
Tom?
Jeffrey?
Dr. Coram, yes?
Jeffrey Coram, Ridge Road. I think I remember we covered this in the policy subcommittee meeting, and I was suggesting using the word "shall," and I think Grammarly didn't like using the word "shall." And then I looked back at the last policy that you just approved on the professional staff positions, where in fact the word "shall" does appear. And I really want to reiterate my feeling that "shall" sort of implies a requirement on the committee for a policy, so that, the salary schedule shall be reviewed. That's my only comment, is that to review this again and put "shall" where, the policy is instructing the committee to do something.
So I think I remember that conversation as well. I mean, shall versus will is obviously, yes, it does imply a forced must do, as opposed to will is, you still will, and it's not really optional, but shall is more forceful, right? As it comes to teachers, it happens anyway, as a result of any collective bargaining. As it comes to principals and administrators, it has to happen as well, because their contracts only go so far. So there really isn't any choice either way. I don't have an opposition necessarily myself to "shall" in this particular case, because there's no choice either way. But I don't know if anybody else has any feedback. Tom, you looking?
No, I just think in all the contracts that we have, each year, so it'll give 1 year, the first year of the contract, and the subsequent years, it says, based on performance and market conditions. So I don't think we have any contracts that I'm aware of for non-unit staff that actually have beyond 1 year listed in terms of salary. So therefore, right now, as we know, we're about to go into executive session, we have to do it. So I agree, I'm supportive of the word shall, but even if the word's will there, I don't think there's a way around it if I didn't want to. Like, it's inevitability that comes up that we have to give a number.
This is the statement, will be reviewed annually.
So there's a couple places. It's in the first one. At the
Will
top,
adopt.
Will be periodically reviewed. It's in the Reading School Committee will adopt a salary schedule. And then it's the principals and administrators will be reviewed annually. So it's 3 places, at least. I can probably word check will. Is there a 4th one? Okay.
The reason I like Jeffrey's language too is because I think the easy thing to do, I don't think I'm in compliance with this if we roll out a blanket percentage to everyone. I don't think that's taking a deeper dive to look at what's saying here, equity, fairness, and like market comparisons. That's like requires a different level of work than maybe just a rolling out of a blanket number. And I think that's what our team does. And I think this policy would require us to do that, but so I don't see any harm in shall.
Michelle, do you have any feedback on shall?
I just what has already been shared, I see it as a non-negotiable, so I don't feel, whether we use will or shall, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing in practice, so I don't feel gravitating towards a particular word just because this has to happen.
Just from a consistency standpoint, if we're using shall in some, there's probably makes sense to use shall in others.
Yeah, and there's will establishes, I don't know that one needs to change necessarily. I don't know that it matters really, but
Wait, sorry, where?
this last one I just said, the school committee with the advice of the superintendent shall or will establish compensation levels for each position based on the circumstances, dynamics, and requirements for each position. You've already done a shall be reviewed annually before July 1st. So I'm not sure if it's a double shall is necessary or not, but. And we can leave it in
Fine
there.
either way.
It's fine either way.
I
really.
think, yeah.
Okay, so everybody's okay with that amendment?
Yes.
Okay. So then I move to approve amended policy GCBA, professional staff salary schedules for adoption.
Second.
Carla got in just barely first. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor? All opposed? And it passes 6-0. Thank you for the feedback. Save a copy. Approved, save. And we move on to GCBB, employment of principals, which used to be known as employment of administrators and directors. So this policy was amended as well in alignment with MASC, and then further adjusted as Michelle went through it to add in some legal-related stuff to it too. Michelle, if you want to add any other things, and the policy subcommittee did add in, did discuss including assistant principals and declined as there's specific rules in MGL with regards to principals that don't apply to assistant principals. So this is just principals themselves. So Michelle, anything else you want to add?
So I clarified that the contract requires school committee approval for compensation and benefits, performance goals, and evaluation criteria. Revised the language to specify that compensation and benefits may only be exceeded with school committee approval. Adjusted language regarding subsequent contracts to clarify that the superintendent follows school committee guidelines to reissue contracts based on previous terms. Explicitly stated that principal contracts cannot exceed 5 years, and specify that principals must maintain licensure as required by DESE.
So this is new, that we would approve the contract. Thanks. We've never
It's sort of been an unwritten thing that, I know Chuck and I have had as chairs a chance to say yes or no to certain things, but not really as a committee, although these meetings like we're going to have right now essentially provide the guiding principles for that. So we have done it, although not necessarily on a language line by line type perspective. So from that perspective, yeah, you would say this is new.
Yeah, I don't recall ever being presented with a full contract to review.
Yeah. So this would be new, yep.
Could that slow down the hiring process? Like if you
Yes.
have to wait for an executive session, right? It would be executive session, right?
It would be executive session because it's not.
So you'd have to
it's
wait for an
exactly
executive
this reason.
session
We
for
do.
the school committee to approve the contract before you can, because I feel like sometimes the hiring,
We'd have to vote it publicly, too. It'd be one of those things that has to happen in both forums, because it's a public document anyway.
It is a public document. Most of them are pretty boilerplate. It's just putting a person and a number in it. There's not usually a lot of adjustments to the principal and administrator ones. Not usually a lot of negotiation. Tom, keep me honest.
Nope, that's fair.
So, yes, we can do that, and we should do that. The only caveat or concern I have, I guess, is really, technically, we're not the hiring authority, right? So while this is updated in alignment with MASC, we're not the hiring authority, but we have the financial responsibility. So it's saying we're approving your contract, that we're not approving the person per se that's being hired, we're approving the contract, which is an interesting thing to think about it, because it's the financial side that we have the responsibility for. But the superintendent has the authority to hire principals, not the school committee.
It's technically true of every hire in the district.
Yep.
So
Not the director of finance.
fair. Nearly every hire in the district. So I have two other questions on this one while we're talking about it. Michelle, the first sentence, the school district shall employ principals under individual employment contracts, is that stipulated by state law? Or are we saying it is, okay,
That's in alignment with MGL.
okay.
And that's important that it says district as opposed to committee, because it's the district that's doing the employing in this
Yeah.
case, not the committee.
Yeah, okay. And then there's a sentence that starts with compensation and benefits may be exceeded only with the approval of school committee. May be exceeded relative to what?
This is where this gets a little fuzzy because this is in line with MGL and MASC. And I think that some of the terms in here in practice are not as straightforward. Just as you mentioned with approving it before an offer goes out, which would absolutely slow down the hiring process.
I'm not even talking about logistics, like grammatically, what does that sentence actually mean, right? It says compensation and benefits may only be exceeded with the approval of school committee. It has to be in reference to something.
So that would say if there's an additional, like if there's something in the scenario that is atypical, so say there's like a stipend or benefits, is there something that we offer to waive as something in regards to employment?
But is that saying that we can never deviate from the contract without approval of the school committee, or relative to other principals, or, that's what I'm trying to get at, I guess. I think what it is intending to say is, we're going to review and approve a contract with each principal, and it's going to dictate what their compensation and benefits are. You or Tom can't, without our approval, go decide to provide a principal with a stipend or something like that. I think that's the intent. I'm not sure that's clear.
Yes.
Interpret.
Okay, I'm not sure that that's clear necessarily in the way that it's worded.
Yeah.
Because this makes it sound like it's part of the contract acceptance process versus a forward-looking, sort of a forward-looking statement.
So, here, I'm going to go back to the MASC, and we might add the language back, but the MASC one says, and I can't zoom in here, the compensation/benefit levels above referenced may be exceeded only with the approval of the school committee. So after it's been approved,
That above reference is important because
Right.
it's saying,
Agreed.
it's making it clear that this is relative to what is agreed to in this contract that we've then approved. You could even say the above referenced compensation and benefits, or the compensation and benefits as articulated in the contract, maybe, something like that. THC compensation,
yeah.
not typically part of our contracts.
Benefits, the above referenced compensation and benefits, how about that?
Yep.
I think you need a hyphen there. Yep.
Okay, that makes it clear. Tom, yes?
I'm still uncomfortable playing this out, how this could work. If I play out a scenario, say we're hiring a principal in July,
Yeah.
I would then, when we're not meeting, I have to then work to put together the contract, get it to the committee to approve before it goes to the principal. You approve it. I then go sit with the principal and try to present a draft contract. They say no. They say I actually wanted, XYZ compensation. I then have to come back to the school committee, get school committee approval on the new contract and go back and forth.
I think it's.
What's my role then? Is then you're essentially negotiating.
Here's what, I mean.
And then also, I just worry the timeline and a lot of these hires,
A lot of extra
a
work.
lot of things in the way that could slow down what are, in a lot of cases, what I would anticipate as a really sometimes competitive processes too.
I think it's the same way you do it with assistant superintendent or director of finance positions, which is you're negotiating the contract and it's subject to school committee approval, right? And you're probably sidebarring with each of us individually to say, here's what I think it's going to take to get this done, and, that kind of thing. And getting a sense for whether you're going to get school committee approval. I'm not saying I think this is the right approach. I'm saying this is, I think, how it would work in practice. I think it would work the same as those kinds of hires do.
I generally agree. Carla, you're
Tim, since I read this, it seems like we are getting into operations. The whole thing seems like that to me.
It's
If they-
budget.
It's budget.
Yeah.
Nope, said contract shall be submitted to the school committee for their approval of all terms,
Yep.
including compensation benefits, okay, because that's related, performance goals, evaluation criteria, that's operations.
For the presentation.
Right? Right, but I feel like
Contracts don't usually have performance goals and evaluation criteria in them.
it's operations to me.
Well, what would be in I guess will be in their benefits, so vacation time, school committee's gonna decide vacation time. I mean, that's not budget.
And there's a
It is budget.
section,
How?
in regards to performance goals, there is a section that
Carry over.
clarifies what their role is and what it's related to an MGL.
Yep.
It's very loose, it's not specific performance goals, but it's basically that they'll uphold their duties as this particular administrator in the Commonwealth.
Right.
Okay. So broad.
Yes.
It's very broad.
Act in
Okay.
accordance with our policies, all that, there's some generic boilerplate type stuff.
The way
yeah.
it's worded, Sean, what you're proposing would go against that, because this is saying, like, we have to approve the contract before it's presented to the
So
candidate.
here's what I'm going to suggest. There's a lot of discussion here. I'm going to suggest that we table this for now, that Michelle and Tom and I at least, absent a full subcommittee, which would be Aaron and I, but which I have to be careful with because Aaron and I meet with Tom anyway, but not on policy topics. Now that we're the only two members of the subcommittee, that's an interesting problem. Michelle and Tom and I will look at this and see if we can come up with better language that aligns to our process,
Yeah.
as well as any vagueness in MGL, and then bring it back. It will not have been subcommittee approved, obviously, by that point, but then the whole committee can have a review and approval at that point. Does that seem appropriate?
Yeah, can I say generally in this one, just one opinion? Obviously, we should be compliant with MGL. I'm not that concerned about being too tied to the MASC model policy in this case,
That's
right?
fine.
Let's think about
We've done
the,
plenty to modify against the MASC standards, so
Yeah.
I have no problem with that myself either.
okay,
Some of it Michelle has done yeoman's work in cleaning up a lot of the MSC work. Maybe I see stuff, so. All right, so I'm going to move to table policy GBB, employment of principals, pending further review and discussion between the chair, the superintendent, and the director of HR.
GCBB.
GCBB, as amended by Aaron. Now, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Any further discussion prior to the tabling? Dr. Corum?
Just curious, Jeffrey Corm again. What happened to the directors? Is there a new policy now that covers the directors that were taken out of this policy?
They're in the previous policy that we just reviewed, essentially.
Right.
Okay. All right. Any further questions or comments? No. All in favor of tabling? And it is so tabled, so I have to create a new folder structure. Thank you for the constructive conversation. And we now move, I can find the right thing, window.
GCBC.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, here's what happened is to, it's over here. We move to the first reading of policy GCBC, professional staff supplementary pay plans. And this is a new policy as well. And I skipped past the one I wanted to do. Supplemental compensation for extra assignments is what we renamed it to, or Michelle renamed it to. So we'll use that name when we do the second reading appropriately. So this one is brand new from MASC. It has been amended by Michelle, and I'll let Michelle take over from here.
So the edits, it doesn't look as scary as the edits look. Basically for this, I improved the clarity, consistency, and readability, and I just updated the language for a modern tone. It looks like I need more edits, but that's really the bulk of it. This was one of my lighter ones.
John?
One minor suggestion. I wonder if we should just make a reference to the principal policy, which we haven't yet adopted, but that says something to the effect of, should a principal be appointed to one of these supplementary pay positions, belt and suspenders, just say, should a principal be appointed to one of these positions, it requires school committee approval, which I think is what we're saying in that, in the policy we just tabled. Does everybody follow what I'm
Yeah.
getting at there?
I'm just trying
Okay.
to see if we can even keep ourselves easier than doing that. I know why you're saying it, and it does align with the previous policy.
And the reason that it caught my eye was we genericized teachers to be employees in a bunch of cases, so it still applies to principals. This policy would still apply to principals, I think.
There is a clause in the principal contract that says, and this is in the individual contracts, that says that if there are any sort of supplemental pay extra assignments, they do have to be approved by the superintendent prior to moving forward.
And the policy then says we have to approve it as school committee as well. So is it already covered in the previous one?
So if it's in the contract and school committee does approve the contract, then I would think that would be covered within.
Michelle, you're saying it's in the basic contract language that we use today?
Yes, so in the basic contract that we use for all administrative contracts, there is, after the salary line, there is a section that specifically talks about extra duties, extra, say, projects, stipends, that are at the discretion and approval of the superintendent before they occur.
So
Yeah, so maybe what we add, Sean.
I always like to think about policies as, things that we want to persist after the people currently in their seats are no longer in their seats.
Agreed.
And the language like that being in our boilerplate contract language is good, but I think that should be reflective of it's a requirement from our policies, right? So I think it's belt and suspenders and doesn't really cost us anything to just add it to a policy like this one to call that out explicitly.
So just so we think about where to put it, where would would it be its own line here, or would you do it in the previous policy?
I think you could do it at the end of the paragraph that you're on right now.
Something like,
Something like, should a principal be appointed to an extra assignment that results in additional compensation, school committee approval is required.
Would it be helpful for me to read what is in the boilerplate contract?
Yeah, we could probably just sync it up with that language.
Okay, so it says, the superintendent may also provide to the administrator for any contract year of this agreement a special project stipend for work above and beyond the expectations of this position named in this contract. e.g. mentoring, teaching course. And then it just goes into how it's paid.
So this is just a first reading.
It says the stipend will not be added to base pay.
Okay. I mean, this is just a first reading, Tom, so I don't feel strongly about how it, honestly, and we can let it go. I'm not going to lose sleep over this. I just thought it was sort of easy belt and suspenders, if that's our intent, to make sure it's referenced in this policy as well.
I'm happy to take this if we want to table, and I can try to rewrite it in somewhere.
it's first reading, so we don't have to table. We can accept the first reading and make an amendment, I mean, therein, coming into the second. Again, you, Tom, and I can talk through it, or you and I can talk through it and go from there. I'll save this as it is right now, and we can come back and see what we come back with. I'll also just add a note that this is a follow-up to confirm language or location. Okay. All right, so move to approve the first reading of policy GCBC, professional staff supplementary pay plans,
Second.
AKA supplemental compensation for extra assignments.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Any further discussion? No? No? All in favor? And all opposed, and it passes 6-0. Thank you. And now,
Can I bring up a quick thing?
before we adjourn to the next thing, yes, if you have something quick, yes.
Can you, we used to put the agenda at the, all the school committee meetings at the end. Can we go back to doing that?
We could, sure,
Just-
yeah. We actually, there used to
Somebody
be
was
something
asking.
at the, I know who's asking, I
Yeah.
saw. There, you know, I think Olivia had it in the appendix at the end for most of the year,
Yeah.
and then we adjusted over the last couple weeks. So
Right.
We'll get it back in.
we'll get it back in, and I'm going to stop the share for a second. Before we go to the next thing, I just want to do a quick little rundown of the next couple of weeks for people, so they know what the plan is.
Michelle can go, right?
Michelle, you're welcome to drop if you would like to. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, good night, everyone.
I'm gonna find it.
Tom, while you pull that up, the thing that I was going to ask about earlier, is there an intent to develop a tentative meeting schedule for, say, July through September in advance of reorg?
I frankly hadn't thought about it yet.
Okay.
Definitely can try, and we can do some quick, like, summer assessments for people, especially for vacations, and try to work around them,
I think that's helpful.
inclusive of retreat planning and stuff like that.
When is the retreat? The 8th? August 8th?
Did we have a date on it? August 8th?
I have August 8th.
Okay. So a couple of quick things for just so everybody knows what's coming in the next couple of meetings. The next meeting is the 29th. We will have the REF grant annual celebration presentation. We will have Josh Whedon name removal request submission, first meeting, first presentation. We will have the we'll have the student services end of year update. We will have the strategy update that I referenced earlier, the strategic plan update, apologies. We may have an update with regards to the Director of Finance or not. We'll think about when that is, either next week or the week after. We will also have, if time permits, and if we look at how long this presentations are going to last, we may have the second readings that we talked about today. If time does not permit, it might be the 5th, or it might be in early July. On the 5th, we will have, prior to our meeting, the annual Teaching and Staff Milestones Awards and Retirement Celebration, starting at 6. So if precedent holds, our regular meeting might not start on time. We'll see what we can do to keep ourselves close to on time. But that will be at 6 o'clock here if you want to come. But the school committee meeting will not start at that point in time. It will start once that's concluded. We'll then have the Josh Wheaton name removal, deliberation, and potential advisory committee formation. We'll have the CPAC end-of-year update, hopefully.
This is on the 5th.
This is on the 5th, yep. We'll have the teaching and learning update on the 5th. We'll have the pre-Q4 financial update, including the discussion around the Special Education Reserve Fund. We'll have Dr. Milichewski's end-of-year personnel update. We'll have his, sorry, not his end-of-year personnel update, Michelle's end-of-year personnel update, Dr. Milichewski's summative review, and then the compensation discussion for Dr. Milichewski on the 5th as well. And as of right now, planning as well for the reorganization at the end of that meeting.
It's a late meeting.
Yeah. This is why I was like, we're going to need another meeting. Because we were looking at all this, and it's like, there's a lot. And we, no matter what it is, everything piles up at the end of the year. Just is what
And
it
that's
is.
all on the 5th.
That's all on the 5th. Yeah. After, well, some of what I said was the 29th, so I gave you the 29th, then I gave you the 5th. So,
And I might not be here for that meeting either.
okay.
You're not here on the 5th?
We have the tennis banquet scheduled for that, and I'm a captain, the parent
Parent
Yeah.
captain, yep.
captain.
Well, maybe you can be here toward the end of it. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
We'll see.
I'm sure we'll still be going after the banquet.
We might be. We've had a few light meetings throughout the year, so we have a lot coming up in the heavy meetings the next couple of weeks. So that's the agenda on a go-forward basis for the next 2 meetings. And I'll
But
see if
then
I
not
can-
till July.
Then not till July. Then you have 3 to 4 weeks off, probably 4 weeks off at that point in time until the second week of July, would be my guess. Up to whoever the chair is at that point in time, but Sean, to your point, I'll try and put a brief schedule together.
I mean, if we're going to do reorg in early June instead of late June, it's less critical. I was just more thinking in past years, we've done it more like the end of June, so,
Right.
yeah.
So with that said, I move to enter executive session to conduct strategy and preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel, central office and principals, to not return to open session,
Second.
because we need to not have the conversation in public. Seconded by Sean. Any further discussion? It's a roll call since we're going to executive session. So Carla?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Tom? Yes. And we are adjourned to executive session.